Adaptation versus translation. What do I mean by that? This is creepy and unsettling. This, I can literally count the frames of animation here. It's one. There's something to be said about a good anime adaptation, taking the source material from the manga and expanding on it within the medium of animation, making creative choices and using tools not available within the limited confines of the manga pages it originated from. And with a horror manga, it should be even easier to make a fairly decent anime adaptation, using the animation, pacing, voice acting, sound effects, and music all together to create a truly terrifying experience. But instead, we get this. But sorry, I jumped pretty quickly into this one, so let me give you a really brief summary of what I'm even rambling on about. Junji Ito, the renowned horror mangaka, famous for his horrifying artwork and spine-chilling page turns, is one of my favorite mangakas of all time. He has created over 100 different short stories, all detailing the lives of different characters and their encounters with strange, terrifying, Lovecraftian horrors. So, even if there's a story of his that doesn't quite spook you, there's almost guaranteed to be one that will. There's something deeply unsettling about a good chunk of his work, and a good deal of that has to do entirely with his intricate and detailed art, because, I won't lie, there are a few stories that are a little bit dumb. But, even within some of Ito's more sillier tales, his artwork within them can still send a chill up my spine regardless. And with any good manga nowadays, of course, an anime adaptation was inevitable. First was the Junji Ito Collection that was released in 2018, which was an anthology of different short horror stories from the manga brought to life. Dude, some of this stuff isn't even animated. And when it is, it's subpar. But worse than any poor animation is really what was lost in translation when adapting these stories to the big screen. Many of these shots and scenes are straight rips from the original manga, which maybe one could argue is a good thing, as the adaptation stays faithful to its source material. But there's such a thing as being too faithful. When you have shots that are one-for-one recreations of the manga on a tight animation budget, not only are we missing animation that could have really enhanced a scene, but we're missing all of the grit, texture, and genuinely unsettlingly amounts of detail to the point where the anime just seems washed out, faded, and a poor imitation of what made the original work so terrifying to look at and read. But wait, hold on. Yep. Oh, right. This came out in 2018. Listen, I know my name is Snail Pirate, but I'm not that slow. So the reason I'm bringing up a Junji Ito anime again, besides it being nearly Halloween, is the fact that another crack was taken at adapting Ito's work with 2023's Junji Ito Tales of the Macabre. And it's slightly better. Emphasis on the slightly. Do you like screaming kids? Maybe you'd enjoy playing Russian roulette with a loaded revolver. With 6 bullets in it. I mentioned this before, but not every single one of Ito's works is inherently scary. Some are meant to be bizarre, and some are just meant to be borderline comedies. But if we're going to market a show as being a horror anime, we should probably stick to the good horror stories he's got. But for some reason, the anime starts off with objectively the worst episode. No. I mean, it is literally the worst rated episode. We essentially just follow the story of an Addams Family knockoff with lots of horrifically annoying screaming. Screaming children aside, the story just sets a terrible tone for how the rest of the anime is supposed to be. And, okay, if we're gonna get the crap out of the way first, well, being an animator myself, I gotta talk about the CGI again. I know that CGI is the infamous boogeyman when it comes to anime, but it gets to be a real problem at times. When used well, CGI can blend seamlessly into the background, being barely noticed, or it can even help to enhance a scene. This is not that at all. It can be hard to recreate some of Ito's terrifying details in an anime, but the over-reliance on CGI only serves to hurt the story that it's in, and completely detract from any horror within the show. At times, the CGI almost makes the show feel like a comedy, like in the Floating Balloons episode, where killer balloons shaped like people's heads come down with nooses and hang people, which, in all honesty, is a legitimately creepy concept, but it just feels goofy in the anime. There's a point where one of the bodies starts frantically ragdolling all over the place to the point that it made me laugh out loud. It felt like I was playing Gmod and throwing some poor NPC around like my own personal plaything. And then there's an episode like the one with a sinister ice cream truck that turns kids into ice cream, with CGI done so badly that you can tell where the anchor points for the animation path are. But even overlooking comically bad CGI, there's still a fundamental problem that's still present even within this new anime. Adaptation versus translation. I think there's almost a bit of hesitancy that I feel from the studio that works on these Ito adaptations. It almost seems like they don't want to stray too far away from the source material, but once again this comes as a hindrance to the anime as a whole. When shots are once again recreated one for one with massive amounts of detail missing, the end product, it just falls flat. For instance, in the story Layers of Fear, there's a panel shot of the mother character using an X-Acto knife to rip off the face of her daughter so that she can get to the underlayers of her face and see her daughter as a 2-year-old again. Yeah, this stuff is kind of weird. Just keep up with me real quick. The original work on this page is done really well, with pages prior to it building the tension and suspension, until you flip the page and are greeted with a grotesque and horrifying sight. Intricate detail in the penwork, a wonderfully drawn, terrified expression, and lighting and shadows that help capture the absolute horror of what lies in front of our faces. Now, let's look at the scene in the anime. This is what I mean by translating Ito's work rather than adapting it. All we got here was a slightly worse drawn recreation of the original panel, with all of the detail missing, and it's not even animated at all here. It makes sense that plenty of the anime can't keep up the same level of detail when animated. That would be way too costly and just take way too much time. But if we're going to have still shots like this one with nothing moving at all, the minimum would be to at least put a little bit more detail into it to at least somewhat capture the same feeling the original panel would invoke. But you know what? Okay, I've been pretty negative about this whole anime so far, and that's doing a disservice to some of the episodes that were done legitimately well. With all of my gripes about what makes a Junji Ito anime adaptation not work, there were 3 episodes that solved some of the issues that I talked about. Those being Mold, Toontown, and Whispering Woman. The episode Mold is the only episode of the entire show that is completely in black and white. And damn, they probably should have just kept the entire show in black and white. The lack of colors gives the episode an already established creepy and unsettling vibe that you don't quite get in some episodes with really oversaturated colors. You already feel like you're in the dark, depressing, and morbid world that Junji Ito has constructed for us before the episode has barely even started. And the lack of color does a decent job at hiding some of the quality problems and lack of detail in the episode. If the rest of the series had been in black and white, there probably wouldn't have been as much of a problem with intricate detail that was missing. Like take this shot from Toontown for instance. Not bad looking on its own at all, but I don't know, I think it kind of looks cool, huh? It suits the type of horror storytelling going on here. And speaking of Toontown, this is another episode that solved some issues I was talking about before, mainly adapting Ito's work well. Rather than just pull panels and recreate the exact same drawings one for one, there were plenty of shots that differed from the manga and looked really impressive. For instance, this panel right here is a simple panel with the brother and sister talking in a graveyard. There's nothing too special about it, rather it's meant to just help the story along. But then look at how it's adapted in the anime. Whoa, what? I mean, okay, was this made by the same people responsible for this? This shot struck me when I first watched it. Not only did it take a small single panel from the manga and make it a much more involved scene, but the composition with the dozens of gravestones looming in the background with the 2 main characters in the front, dressed in darkness, is legitimately impressive. And not to spoil the plot of this particular episode, but having the characters surrounded from basically all 4 corners of the screen with gravestones feels suffocating, and it kind of feels appropriate, especially for what these 2 had done earlier on in the episode. But a good anime isn't just its visuals. Audio is often overlooked, but plays a massive role in making or breaking an anime, and in terms of a horror anime, it's vital that the audio is done right, otherwise you get... In the story Whispering Woman, we follow the story of a girl named Mayumi that straight up cannot make a single decision by herself without having a panic attack. In other words, she's a zoomer. Her father worries for her and hires helpers that can help take care of his daughter, but almost all of them leave within the month after realizing how absolutely terrible this job is. Until a peculiar woman takes up the mantle and stays with the girl, carefully whispering orders to her on what to do and what not to do. The voice actress here does a phenomenal job at capturing the tired but soft whispers of the woman throughout the episode. But what I love is, and spoilers ahead, later on when the helper is killed by her abusive boyfriend, she still whispers orders to the young girl from beyond the grave, and it is absolutely eerie. And when a bloodied Mayumi returns back to her father after enacting an order from her deceased helper, the whispering becomes more constant, filling the entire scene, becoming almost unbearable until... And damn, that was one of the strongest scenes for me in the entire anthology. The quick cut to complete and almost deafening silence just to be met with a soft and gentle whisper one last time from Mayumi's helper is spine-chilling. These 3 episodes still had their faults within them, and for the most part they still don't quite live up to the original manga, but combining the strongest points from each into one horror story could prove to be a success. And I think we are seeing that with the newest Junji Ito anime adaptation that is yet to come out, titled Uzumaki. From the trailers alone, not only do we get a beautiful recreation of Ito's work animated, but it's completely in black and white to already start us off with a creepy and dreadful vibe. Some of the shots aren't quite one-for-one recreated translations of the source material, but instead build off of it and adapt it more appropriately for the animation medium. And the music so far is absolutely haunting. Now, this anime adaptation of Uzumaki was announced over 4 years ago, and was announced to be on Toonami in 2020. So, we might still be waiting a little bit longer than that one. But, the last thing I want after some mediocre adaptations already is for another of Ito's masterpieces to fall flat because of rushed animators. And if Uzumaki is able to touch on and succeed in some of the areas I talked about earlier, then we might be in for a ride with what could possibly be Junji Ito's best adapted work so far. And I, for one, can't wait.
Did someone shut that kid up?
Thanks for watching the video. Did you watch any of the Junji Ito anime? If so, let me know what you thought of them in the comments down below. I'm curious. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos about anime, manga, VTubers, and even some animations I've made. I've been Snellpart, and I'll see you bodacious buccaneers in your nightmares.